How does your past trauma affect the person you are today? The more we learn about psychology, the more that we learn that while we have some research, there are some things that are just unknown to us. Now, I have done some extensive research into the topics of mental health, but all in all, I'm not a mental health professional. I'm just applying the things that I have read about mental health to the characters in these novels. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on these topics, especially if you're a mental health professional. Please chime in the comments. In our last episode of the podcast, we looked into the backgrounds of the big three main characters in Sarah J. Maas's series, Aelin, Feyre, and Bryce. Each of these characters suffered trauma during their youth, and today we're going to look at how that trauma affects the decisions they made throughout the books. Just a reminder, your thoughts and resources might help us to understand these characters better, so make sure you add links in the comments if you have some ideas. Now, let's dive into the world, starting with Celaena, aka Aelin. Thankfully, there's too much Throne of Glass content to talk about in one podcast episode. We're so happy to have too much of a good thing. Unfortunately, that means I will only be focusing on the scenes I thought were most important for Celaena's mental health and her character development. However, if you think I missed a scene or there was a scene that you thought was impactful to you, I'd love to hear more about it in the comments. At the beginning of this series, Celaena is defining herself after being a slave in the salt mine. Sure, she puts on a front, but it's clear that she's not able to be herself. She's able to train with expert fighters and gain skills in order to start her journey anew. Since this is not the first time she has redefined herself, Celaena is able to fill her cracks and start her healing journey. However, she doesn't have long before she's thrown into her next quest. Before she got in her bearings, one of the assassins in the championship was killed. Celaena has just solved that issue when the king has decided to make her his assassin to spite Dorian. She will work for him for 4 years, and then she will have her freedom. Freedom is something that Celaena craves, and she sees this as an opportunity to get away. Although things for her are tough, Celaena finds ways to cope with trauma. As I mentioned in part 1, Celaena is dealing with PTSD from being in the salt mines. She deals with this trauma by creating a schedule for herself, and Chaol helps her to keep that schedule. She also makes new friends and is able to disclose with them what happened to her in the salt mines. Being able to share this trauma helps her to deal with the negative effects of her PTSD. In building a network and building a safe space, Celaena finds a healthy way to deal with the stress she is going through. So although her new position is with a person Celaena does not agree with, it is probably what was best for her mental health. Staying close to the king's court was very important for her. She also finds a way to trick the king by not killing any of her victims. Celaena is able to talk to her potential victims and help them get away. Then she brings back another dead body to prove to the king that it's done. So not only does Celaena keep her network, Celaena is able to get back at the man who caused her and her family harm. This shows that although Celaena is a brutal assassin, she still cares about doing the right thing. Her life is on the line, but killing innocent people is not something she's willing to do. This behavior shows that although Celaena has been through a number of bad things, she still has her morals and she still cares about others. Celaena has made a home for herself in Aelin. She has Chaol, Dorian, and Nehemia, a young woman who is a court emissary for her father in the north. Nehemia gives Celaena an ear, and they are good friends for each other. Then Nehemia teaches Celaena about the weird marks and teaches her how to use them. Since magic is outlawed in Aelin, this is a tricky business. However, the two of them study about the marks that they find throughout the castle. Through learning about the weird marks, Celaena is able to find out that she's Fae. At first, Celaena is reluctant to accept that she's Fae and that she has magic. Almost everything that could go wrong goes wrong at the end of book 2. Celaena tries to kill Chaol after believing he was the one who killed her only friend Nehemia. Chaol finds out that Celaena is Aelin, heir to the throne, but thankfully he saves her. At the end of book 2, Celaena is sent to another city to take out Nehemia's father and the royal family. However, as we know, Celaena makes contact with her Aunt Maeve and goes to train with Rowan and become familiar with her Fae powers. Initially, Rowan and Celaena don't get along. Rowan is having a difficult time coping with the loss of his mate, and Celaena is reluctant to accept that she is actually Fae. This time with Rowan initially seems bad for Celaena's mental health, since Rowan beats her and threatens to tie her down until she accepts her Fae identity. However, after weeks of training, Celaena is running away from a mythical creature which makes her relive the traumatic memories that she had been repressing. From that moment on, Celaena chooses to be Aelin and wants to avenge her people. This moment was so important for Aelin for many reasons. These memories helped her to remember her roots, and it gave her a new reason to fight. It also connects her and Rowan, furthering the bonds that they have made. I think this is one of the most important moments in Aelin's storyline. Throughout the next books, Aelin deals with a number of difficult situations. She has to go back to Ardalan to gather her team and gain more intel on the magic suppression system. She defeats the Vlag and recruits more team members. She makes outrageous plans and everyone follows her because she's the #1 badass. Of all the big 3, she confronts problem after problem for 3 years without any breaks. There are many times where Aelin feels like she's not ready or like she's not enough. This is evidenced a few times throughout the novel, but none is more prevalent than when she's on the ship before her and her friends fight in one of the coolest battles of the novels at Skull Bay. While sailing, Aelin is going through it. She doesn't trust herself as a leader, and she feels the weight of all the tasks she has to accomplish bearing down on her shoulders. This could be because Aelin doesn't trust anyone else with making plans or saving the day. But as queen, she does bear the responsibility of her people. I think that Aelin feeling downcast makes her more of an authentic character. But there could be something else at play. Also, at the end of the novel, Aelin tries to sacrifice herself to save Dorian. They know that one of them need to do so in order to lock the Vlag away forever. She doesn't want to find an alternative route. She's willing to be the sacrifice like her predecessor was. Aelin struggles through many difficulties, but she's so resilient. Maeve tortures her, and she's beaten time and time again. But Aelin goes down deep within herself, and she finds the will to continue. Here's a quote that shows this. Her cheek against the Maas, the young princess she had been, Aelin Galathinius, reached a hand for her. Get up, she said softly. Celaena shook her head. Aelin strained for her, bridging that rift in the foundation of the world. Get up. A promise. A promise for a better life, a better world. Get up, someone said beyond the young princess. Sam. Sam standing just beyond, where she could see him, smiling faintly. Get up, another voice, a woman's voice. Nehemia. Get up. 2 voices together, her mother and father's faces, grave but eyes bright. Her uncle was beside them, the crown of Terrasen on his silver hair. Get up, he told her gently. One by one, like shadows emerging from the mist, they appeared, the faces of the people she had loved with her, heart of wildfire. I had a hard time now crying reading that. Aelin's fire is a symbol of her passion and strength. She's a fiery person, and her power is a deep well. Throughout the book, she approaches her challenges head-on and uses the skills she learned as an assassin, as well as her magic to solve her problems. Although there are times when Aelin is willing to end it all, she digs deep inside and finds the strength to soldier on. This is shown in a few times during the book. Here's the first quote. She was Aelin Ashriver Galathinius, and she would not be afraid. Quote 2. She was the heir of ash and fire. She would bow to no one. And quote 3. She was not afraid. She would remake the world, remake it for them, those she had loved with this glorious burning heart, a world so brilliant and prosperous that when she saw them again in the afterworld, she would not be ashamed. She would build it for her people, who had survived this long, and whom she would not abandon. She would make them a kingdom, such as there had never been, even if it took her last breath. At the end of the series, when Dorian and Aelin come together to seal their world, this was the perfect moment. Both of them were willing to give their lives for their cause, but they were stronger together. They healed the divide between their ancestors and came together to make it a better world. Overall, while Aelin struggles with the darkness inside her, Aelin is willing to push past and fight for what is right. She stands up for the innocent, she fights for those who she loves, and she fights to save her world from the evil of the Flag. Aelin is strong and resilient. She may cry, but she gets up to fight. She lives for those who sacrifice themselves for her and what she fights for. Aelin is a true hero and someone that young women can aspire to be like. Feyre overcame many struggles in her novels as well. Feyre starts this novel as a struggling young girl and ends her book series as one of the strongest Fae in all of history. So what gets her to this point? At the beginning of Feyre's arc, she is taken by Tamlin to live in the Spring Court. In the Spring Court, Feyre is given everything that her human self could have possibly asked for. She has food, shelter, and safety. Also, her family, who had been such a burden to her, is being taken care of. All of these things are fantastic for Feyre, but she still doesn't feel complete. Her relationship with Tamlin may be considered Stockholm Syndrome. And since this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, I'm tempted to agree. Here are a list of symptoms related to Stockholm Syndrome. Affection and attachment to your abuser. Attempting to help the abuser. Distrust of or anger towards those trying to extract them from the situation. Rationalizing abuse. Perceiving basic dignity as kindness. Feeling powerless. These are all feelings that Feyre feels during her time with Tamlin, if you switch the word abuser with captor. Tamlin represented all the things that Feyre needed when she was a human. He was safe, and he helped her feel needed. Listen to this quote. I found him carefully studying me, his lips a thin line. Has anyone ever taken care of you? He asked quietly. No. I'd long since stopped feeling sorry for myself about it. This is what human Feyre needed. However, once Feyre gets her powers, Tamlin's toxic traits are no longer what Feyre needs. Feyre is now one of the most powerful beings in all of the Fae world, and Tamlin wants to keep her locked away from everyone. He feels anxious when she leaves the castle. Tamlin's anxiety and lack of understanding causes their relationship to break. He does not see what his behavior is doing to Feyre, and he doesn't want to change it until it's too late. In ACOTAR, Feyre is put through many challenges when she has to save Tamlin and Amarantha. First of all, she has to stay in a jail cell where she's treated poorly. She has to fight a giant worm, solve riddles, and then she's forced to kill 3 people, one being the man she loves. During her time in the dungeon, Feyre is distracted by Rhysand. He keeps her from losing her mind, though sometimes his means are questionable. He protects her by giving her the skills she needs to succeed. For example, he speaks into her mind to save her from pulling the wrong lever and killing Lucien. However, Rhys tricks Feyre into thinking that he's doing this as a ploy when he forces her to make a pact to him. Feyre's time in the dungeon is an interesting time for her mental health. She suffers a great deal, not only physically, but mentally, as she fights for her love. I love this quote from the dungeons. Rhysand stared at me for long enough that I faced him. Be glad of your human heart, Feyre. I pity those who don't feel anything at all. Many times, Feyre wishes she was like Tamlin, who had a heart of stone. However, as Rhys points out, it's Feyre's goodness that makes her an authentic character. Her compassion is both a strength and a weakness. If it weren't for her heart and her bold actions, she wouldn't have been saved by the High Lords of Prythian. I mostly love that Maas switches up the Beauty and the Beast trope in this moment. Instead of Tamlin getting a glow up, it is Feyre who goes through the Disney-esque transformation and becomes one powerful Fey woman. The next powerful moment for Feyre comes when she chooses to then be the master of her own fate, and she chooses Rhysand over Tamlin. In the beginning of A Court of Mist and Fury, it is clear that Feyre is unwell. She's not sleeping well, she has nightmares, she's physically ill, and she's not able to be outside and be herself. These all sound like familiar symptoms. Like Aelin, she had PTSD. It doesn't help that Tamlin is not there to listen to her or help her. He, too, is struggling to find himself after being taken advantage of by Amarantha. He also didn't have the best examples of what it's like to be a good man. So, as everyone else plans Tamlin and Feyre's wedding, Feyre slips further and farther away from herself. The only one who seems to notice is Lucien. On her wedding day, Rhysand comes to save her and claims the 1 month of time with Feyre. Talk about timing. I would say this is everyone's favorite part when he winnows out of nowhere saying, "Hello, Feyre, darling." Anywho, Rhysand empowers Feyre by teaching her how to read and write. Feyre's time in the Night Court helps her to see life doesn't have to be like how it was with Tamlin. She sees that Rhys is a fair ruler, that he has a great group of friends who support each other. When Feyre chooses Rhys to be her partner, Feyre is choosing her own mental health and sanity. I think that this is the first time in her life that Feyre chooses herself. Here's a quote that shows Feyre's thoughts in picking Rhysand. But Rhys would never have not seen what was happening to me, would never have been so misguided and arrogant and self-absorbed. He knowed what Ithani was from the moment he met her, and he understood what it was like to be a prisoner and helpless to struggle every day with the horrors of both. Rhysand understands what Feyre needs, whereas Tamlin just wanted Feyre to fit into his life. Rhys's intentions are clear with this quote, "She is my mate and my spy," I said too quietly. "And she is the High Lady of the Night Court." "What?" Moore whispered. I caressed a mental finger down that bond now hidden deep, deep within us and said, if they had removed her other glove, they would have seen a second tattoo on her right arm. The twin to the other, inked last night when we crept out, found a priestess, and I swore her in as my High Lady. Not consort, not wife. Feyre is the High Lady of the Night Court, my equal in every way. She would wear my crown, sit on my throne beside me, never sidelined, never designated to breeding, and parties and child-rearing, my queen. In becoming Rhysand's equal, Feyre is able to come out of her shell and become the woman she was meant to be. Feyre was always strong, but she never had a strong sense of self. She always had to live for other people. Now Feyre gets to live her life for herself, and that gives her partner life. Another important thing that happens in A Court of Mist and Fury is Feyre having to save her sisters from the King of Hybern. It must have been traumatic for Feyre. However, I do think that part of Feyre must have been relieved to have her sisters become Fae. Now she no longer has to think about their welfare and their lives because they can just live amongst the Fae in her court and be protected. That does sound a bit callous, and I'm sure she would have preferred for them to stay human, since neither of them wanted to become Fae, but I'm also sure there was a large part of her that was relieved. In Book 3, Feyre is helping Rhys and the Night Court wage war against the King of Hybern. Feyre sabotages the Spring Court and recruits Lucien into her efforts. Of course, Tamlin's not happy about this, but it's his own dang fault because he's a poor leader. Throughout the book, Rhys and Feyre rely on each other to complete difficult tasks to save the Fae world. It is clear that each task is a burden for them, but since they have each other and the help of their court, they are able to face each task with grace. Rhys helps get all of the court together, then he and Feyre get help from the other High Lords together at a conference. even if they have to steal it. They also enlist help from other supernatural entities of the land, which leads to my favorite task, when Feyre and Rhysand have to get information from the infamous bone carver. It is clear that the bone carver leaves a mark on Feyre. When he appears to her, she sees that he is a young boy who could easily be Rhys and Feyre's son. This is an interesting psychological puzzle that the two work together to solve the physical puzzle to get to the harp, one item that has been long lost in the world. Again, if only Feyre or Rhys would have had to go through this task, it would have been difficult, but since they can work together, they are able to keep each other in check. Feyre also finds a way to overcome her past mistakes. Feyre doesn't really have much time to dwell on what happened between her and her sisters, and also what happened to the other human girl whose name she stole. But sometimes Feyre's past does come back to haunt her. That being said, this quote shows some of Feyre's healing during this time. Myself. I saw myself, and what I was, I think I loved it, forgave it, me, all of it. Feyre is proud of the woman that she's become with Rhysand and the Night Court. She is strong and can defend herself, yes, but she can also help others. Feyre's big heart makes her a great queen. Feyre has a great support network to help her, unlike her past self. For the first time in her life, Feyre has people who love and support and help her during difficult times. The last trauma that Feyre deals with is the loss of her father and again almost losing her sisters. Feyre's family means so much to her, but her relationship with her father was always troublesome. Feyre loved her father, but after losing everything, he became an absent parent. Then, at the end of this book, Feyre's father shows up for them. He finds a navy of people to come help fight in the battle. And then, the King of Hybern takes him out in one foul swoop. Feyre loved her father, and even though he did them a disservice when she was growing up, it is clear that she cared about him deeply. The two had a bond. Losing her father helped spur Feyre to do what she needed to do. She was able to put her thoughts aside and mourn his death with her sisters later. I thought this was such an important moment for Feyre's arc. Now I know people are on the fence about the novella A Court of Frost and Starlight. Personally, I loved it. This was a nice palate cleanser that gave us insight into characters and their mental health as they are moving past a difficult time. During this time, Feyre opens up an art studio and paints her feelings. Then she makes it an open studio so that more people can do the same thing. I honestly couldn't love Feyre more than I do in this moment. What a lovely space for her and her people. This gives them an opportunity to heal and find an outlet for their pain, like Feyre has. I'm so glad that Maas and her publishers gave us this novel. We don't often get to see our main characters out of stressful situations, and they're often just running from one world-ending event to another. It's nice to see our characters just being themselves and being at peace. Now, I'm not going to talk about A Court of Silver Flames. I think that Nesta's journey is worth exploring, and I will talk more about Feyre and Nesta's relationship in a short video coming out in the next few weeks, so look for that on my YouTube channel. Overall, Feyre's mental health journey is the most inspiring. Her big human heart lets her empathize with others and make her a great queen. Also, her past helps her to be a protector and a defender since she cares so much about others. I think that Feyre is an inspiring character and that we can learn a lot from her struggles in these novels. But most importantly, you can see the importance of the influences of the people who are around you. Who you choose to surround yourself with makes all the difference in who you become. Bryce Quinlan probably has the best mental health of the big three. Again, this book has a modern setting, but as we talked about last week, it is also because Bryce has a support system. Bryce's mother and stepfather are both involved in Bryce's life, and they have raised her to be strong, sassy, and capable. Bryce's inner voice is the most confident in her actions and the most sure of who she is. As we know, Bryce is a party girl. She enjoys herself and what life has to offer her. Then again, this could be because of her age, but is more than just the person she puts on. It's a part of who she is. However, when Danica passes, Bryce uses her partying to hide her feelings. She throws herself into chasing the high. Not to say that she isn't responsible. She is. She does her day-to-day job, and she does it well. However, she isn't trying for much else. After Bryce finished university, she wanted to get a job at an art museum, as a curator, I believe, and now she's stuck working for Jessica and not really doing much else. Then Bryce meets Hunt, and all of that changes. As Fury said, Bryce was a ghost for a long time, Hunt. She was pretending she wasn't, but she was. The helicopter finally pulled into the air. You brought her back to life. End quote. Whether it was Hunt or Bryce finally finding the answers about Danica that pulled her out of her funk, it's unclear. But I'd like to think it was because of Hunt. Throughout House of Blood and Earth, Bryce pulls herself out of the slump she's been in. She had already been doing detective work for Jessica, so doing work with Hunt is nothing new. However, it does seem to be more challenging for her. Bryce and Hunt make a great team. Bryce knows the underworld, and having the Umbra Mortis by her side gives her leverage in many situations. As Bryce uncovers information about the missing horn and recovers her relationship with her brother Rune, this book shows Bryce's healing journey. Let's talk real quick about my favorite moment of this book, and maybe my favorite moment of SJM books altogether. When Bryce completes the drop, she has the help of her best friend. This part of the book was the most inspiring part of the book to me. It's not often we are able to make peace with the people we love who have passed away, but Bryce was able to see her best friend again. And although she didn't have the time to give her answers, Danica was able to help Bryce find her power, which I think is a symbol for her inner strength. And she goes to save the world. Here's a quote from the scene. Bryce's face crumpled as she lurched to her feet, sprinting to the gate. She didn't care how it was possible. Danica said again, "Light it up." Then Bryce was laughing and sobbing, and she screamed, "Light it up, Danica! Light it up! Light it up! Light it up!" Bryce slammed her palms onto the bronze discs of the gate, and soul to soul with the friend whom she had not forgotten, the friend who had not forgotten her, even in death, Bryce made the drop. This powerful friendship is inspiring and moving. Bryce is strong because of the connections that she makes. The people in her life make her stronger. There is evidence of this at the end of this book. Bryce has the ability to fight not only an archangel, but she has the ability to fight off hordes of hell and close the gates. However, Bryce doesn't do it alone. Ethan helps Bryce save hundreds of human people. Danica helps her to unlock her potential, and Hunt is able to shield her at the end. Even though Bryce is strong, she doesn't have to conquer her battles by herself. We see this theme continue throughout House of Sky and Breath. Even though Bryce keeps finding out painful information about the person she thought she knew best, Danica, Bryce soldiers on in her hunt for a meal and hopefully answers. Bryce and Hunt grow closer together as they get to know each other and each other's families. However, they also spend much of this book working different angles of this case. Hunt has agreed to be simpatico with the government, and he and Bryce have to look like they are on the side of the government after all the chaos of Book 1. Bryce continues to grow and learn in this book as she learns more and more about her starlight powers. She works with Cormac to learn how to winnow, and she gains strength as well as resilience as she tries to do difficult things. As far as mental health goes, Bryce is in a very good place in this book. She makes up with Juniper and then ruins again everything with Juniper. But that seems to be her only drama in this book. Other than the stress of not really knowing her best friend, Bryce seems to have an easier time than her counterparts in other books. In the rooftop scene, we learn that Bryce tried to end her life. In Book 1, she seems to be recovering from losing Danica, but we learn that Bryce sacrificed her soul so that Danica could live. This selfless sacrifice is something that shows Bryce's love for Danica. It also shows that she is grieving, Many people do reckless things after losing the people they love, and Bryce is no exception. While her behavior is worrisome, I do not think that it is beyond the normal scope of grief. Danica and Bryce were like sisters, and Bryce didn't only lose Danica that day, but she also lost Connor, who she was about to start a relationship with. Also, the suspicious nature of the death of the wolves left Bryce with little closure on the situation. Sabine shutting out Bryce from the funeral also wouldn't help Bryce to feel like Danica's death wasn't her fault. Though, if she was there, she also would have died. Overall, I feel like Bryce's reaction to losing the people closest to her, while devastating, were realistic. It also helps to explain the arc in Book 2 and Bryce's obsession with finding the answers about the woman she thought she knew. Bryce's relationship with her father was complicated. It's clear that she held nothing but contempt for him, and when she helps Rune to kill him, she doesn't feel bad. That man abused Rune and made Bryce feel less than her whole life. Bryce and Rune literally bring down the patriarchy in this book. This is an awesome moment. I'd like to talk quickly about the relationship between Bryce and Rune and how his faith in her helps her to overcome many challenges, such as this. Rune's recognition of Bryce early in these books gives her power to do things that need to get done. At the beginning of Crescent City, Rune is there to help Bryce in jail. Then throughout the book, he continues to give her support in figuring out information about the horn. As the series continues, he lends support to Bryce and even gives her the crown to recognize that she is the best person for the job. I think that Rune's support of Bryce gives her the courage and strength she needs to get things done. Bryce's whole team of people believes in her, and that gives her strength. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like Bryce's journey in Hofas was a step backward in her mental health journey. In this book, Bryce reacts more than she acts. She lets her fear and anger get in the way of the person she has become. I do think this regression was interesting, so let's dive in. At the beginning of this book, Bryce finds herself in Rhysand's night court, in jail. She quickly finds a way to get out of the jail cell and follows her light, aka her heart, to find a hologram left for her by an old relative. In this hologram, the relative explains her journey from Midgard and how she let hundreds of her people die so that she could live. This makes Bryce very angry, and it further confirms her thought that all Fae are just selfish creatures who only care about amassing power and do not care who they take down to get there. When Bryce returns to Midgard, she's in a bad mood. While I was annoyed by Bryce's behavior, I did find this idea that she was covering very interesting and relevant to today's world. The current culture is diving down into our history and finding out stories from the people they've looked up to in the past, and it can be disorienting. For example, Thomas Jefferson, a founding father, took advantage of many women he owned. This is just one of the thousands of people who we've placed on a pedestal and hidden the full story about. However, I for one think it's powerful to learn that all these people were not perfect. They did great things for their country and laid the foundations for greater things to happen, but they themselves were not the standard for what perfection should be. For hundreds of years in the United States, we have covered up for people's blunders and hid the skeletons of people's closets instead of showing people for who they truly are. I, for one, am excited to see how we uncover history to find that people are just people. They make mistakes, and that doesn't mean they're all good or all bad. History is full of amazing people who did both amazing and terrible things, and to say that a person is all good or all bad makes it impossible for the rest of us. I believe that this view of history and the people in it will help us have a better understanding of what the men and women who came before us and help us build empathy as well as deal with cognitive dissonance. Back to Bryce. Bryce comes back to save the day and her plans to take down the government. She relies on her team to back up this plan and is not thrilled when Hunt is being wishy-washy about it. I think about how she handled that situation, and it wasn't very healthy for her or Hunt. She railroads his feelings and later apologizes, but this further proves that Bryce is not in a healthy state of mind. As a reader and Bryce fan, I was very frustrated by Bryce in this book and how she talks about the Fae. However, I do think it was an interesting move made by Maas, and that it's very normal for someone who has taken on so much stress and responsibility as Bryce to be acting this way. She's dealing with difficult emotions, and the fact that she doesn't handle it all with grace and understanding is actually quite refreshing. Not all female main characters have to be perfect all the time. At the end of the book, Bryce sacrifices herself to save Midgard. Unlike Aelin, this wasn't a pattern in her life, and it was done in the spur of the moment. The strength to do this comes from many places. She remembers her father teaching her to shoot, and also the people who have loved and supported her. She also cares for all the humans who have been treated poorly by everyone over the centuries. Bryce is a hero, and her actions prove that she is mentally strong and willing to be the person that Midgard needs. At the end of this book, Bryce seems to be back to her normal self. She has a plan to help the Fae learn how to self-govern and create a democracy. It would appear that Bryce is back to her old Bryce self, now that she has accepted her role as queen until she can get her government off the ground. I'm excited to see how things are going for Bryce and the gang in book 4, but who knows when we'll get that book. I'm hoping soon. Bryce is a female that many people can relate to. Her sassy attitude and her ability to command the room. Bryce is fierce and loyal. Her rage towards the Fae echoes the rage that many women feel in today's world when learning about historical figures that have been touted as men who have high ethical standards and are good people. Bryce is a modern woman and suffers from many of the torments that modern women go through. That may be why so many people relate to her. I was going to end this episode by talking about the relationships between the big three and their partners. However, I realized that not only do I not have enough time to cover the intricacies of these relationships, I'm also not qualified to talk about relationships. I have read several articles about this topic, and I feel like the more I read, the less qualified I am. If you're interested, I could bring someone onto the podcast who is qualified to talk about relationships, and we can have a conversation. Let me know in the comments if this is something you'd want. However, I would like to end with a few ideas that came up while I was researching these characters. Many people have written their master's and undergraduate thesis on the impact of reading books with strong female characters and how they empower young girls and young women to make the changes in the world around them. Each of these female characters is strong-willed, empowered, and bold. They are willing to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves, and they make many sacrifices to help their people. While sources vary as to what this says about our society as a whole and the climate of our mental health, I do love that we are seeing more female characters stepping into the role of hero. It is good to have a variety of heroes so that everyone can see themselves in the role of hero. The more diversity that we have in literature, the better. I, for one, am excited to read more female main characters in the world of fantasy, and I hope that it inspires young girls to be brave, courageous, and true to themselves. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of According to Your English Teacher. This episode took a lot of time and research, but it was so fun and enjoyable. If you liked this episode, make sure to give it a review or a thumbs up. This helps to support the channel and helps me to continue to do what I'm doing. It also helps other people to find my content. I would love to grow this community of readers. I would like to leave you with one last quote from A Court of Thorns and Roses. Don't feel bad for one moment about doing what brings you joy. This episode of According to Your English Teacher was written by me, Sam Gunther, and edited by Dallin Gunther. The music was done by Tom Brinton. Please join me next week for the last week of Mental Health Week as we unpack the work of Dolly Adderton's Good Material. Thanks for listening and happy reading.